Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to Manifesting Healing Monday. We will be talking about Black women and workplace bullying. We are on part six of the series, in which we will be talking with another special guest who just joined us. So, guest. So, again, welcome to Manifesting Healing Monday. We'll be talking about Black women and workplace bullying. Hello, Dr. Loren Hill. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. I'm great. How are you doing
Good.
today?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us today. As I was just welcoming the listeners, we've been talking about Black women and workplace bullying. Good evening, Queens. I see you, Black Sapphire. And we have been talking about this for the whole month of October for Bullying Prevention Month, and we extended it into November because of how prevalent this issue is. And so many Black women wanted to tell their story, and we're looking at Black women across different professions, right? Because what we see and what we're finding out is that workplace bullying for Black women is very common, and that we actually have higher rates of experiencing workplace bullying. So what I wanted to do was to provide an opportunity for us to talk about it, to hear about it from different Black women, so we know we're not alone in the experience, which is very important because when we experience trauma, many times we think we're alone, right? So saying we're not alone, but also highlighting what are the different ways that Black women have been manifesting healing in relation to workplace bullying. So again, I want to thank you, Dr. Hill, for joining us today. So I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself, and then we'll go right into the dialogue.
Thank you so much for inviting me on as part of your guest speaker series on this very important topic of workplace bullying. And so I am Dr. Loren N. Hill, and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of California. And I have a private practice where we specialize in neurodevelopmental psychology. And I also have a coaching practice where I assist people who are interested in working in academia.
Thank you. So we're going to dive right into it, right? So I'm wondering if you could just share with the listeners about an experience of workplace bullying that you've had.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, it's probably a lot more common.
Dr. Hill, your sound is going out.
Okay. Let's see. What about now? Is this better?
Much better, much better,
Okay.
much better. Thank you.
So it's probably a lot more common than people tend to think it is. We hear bullying and we think about kids, right?
Hmm.
We don't really think about adults being bullied. And if they are, then, so just get over it, right? It's a
Hmm.
job. Just go to work, get your job done, and then deal with it. So,
Right.
in my experience, I've actually had uh, bullying in two work environments. One was peer to peer, the other was a supervisor. And
Wow.
in both instances, what I came to realize after the fact was that there was a culture of bullying in both workplaces,
Hmm.
and that there were times where there was poor supervision. Sometimes supervisors get jobs and they have very limited interpersonal skills, or they just happen to be the person that was there at the time. And
Hmm.
if you're someone who is really dedicated to your job, you might just, tough it up like I did.
Hmm.
Just,
Hmm.
okay, I can deal with this. I really want to be here. I
Hmm.
like other people here. I like my mission of this organization. And, maybe this too shall pass,
Uh,
right?
uh-huh. I'm gonna stick it
So
out.
with
I'm gonna
that
stick it
in
out.
mind, yeah, exactly,
Uh-huh.
exactly. So, pray about it, talk to your support system. And it just ended up being that one of my mentors told me that I should leave the last place. She
Hmm.
told me that because of the culture and it was so toxic and it actually seemed to reward bad behavior,
Hmm.
that I should just find a different place. And she
Right.
was really, the way she said it to me was really interesting because we had gone to lunch and it was probably my fourth or fifth time telling her about what was going on there. And she said, you know what? You're not crazy. You just don't fit there. It's not a
Hmm.
good fit for you. So that's when I sort of took stock and said, wow, I have a lot to offer.
Hmm.
Clearly, they don't appreciate it. My hair was falling out. I was sort of emaciated. I was very
Hmm.
stressed out. It didn't
Hmm.
seem like anything I could do would please, this particular supervisor. And in fact, the more I worked, the more he sort of bullied me.
Wow.
So it was
So,
really rough. It was rough.
yeah. And you know what you're saying, Dr. Hill, is that this was a period of time, right? So you tried so hard to kind of stick with it. I could make it, I could pray. So we kind of pull on all our different coping strategies, to try to get through things. But sometimes the culture, like you said, the culture is toxic and the culture supports that bullying type of behavior. So it's not like anything you could do to make it go away because it's the whole culture. And you were dealing with that and struggling with that you talked to your mentor several times about it, to the point she was like, it's not you. And I think that happens a lot with bullying, is that we start thinking, did I do something wrong? What's wrong with me? Why can't I just, snap out of it? Other people deal with this. Is there something wrong with me? So all that self-questioning takes a toll on us, right? And you also talked about the toll that it took, not only in terms of you questioning yourself, but actually physical symptoms. Your hair is falling out. Your appetite is poor. So were there other signs and symptoms, Dr. Hill, that you were experiencing where you were like, this is not okay?
Absolutely. I was depressed. I was depressed. I was anxious. I was losing sleep. It was all of the signs and symptoms. We're both psychologists, so we
Yeah,
we know this, right?
yeah.
But at that time, I was in an academic setting, and so
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't really doing the clinical aspect of it. But I
Mm-hmm.
knew that I was depressed. I knew that I was anxious. I knew that I was
Hmm.
stressed. Um, but I just wanted to be committed to the job, and I was
Right.
hoping that things would work out.
Right, right, right. So the longer you stayed, though, the more you were being harmed in the process. And so still just trying and wanting, and then you're still getting harmed. And so it's very interesting that we are both psychologists and we do recognize, the signs like, oh, this looks like depression. This looks like anxiety. However, it does seem like we kind of still feel like we can push through. And I think that's part of us as Black women, is that we always have this ingrained sense that we could just push through it. We can push through it. We're strong. We're strong. And yes, we can. But again, it takes a toll. And I actually posted something recently that said, no situation is worth your mental health, right? So,
That is so true.
it doesn't matter. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. So you got to the point, Dr. Hill, where you were like, no, no more. Was it the mentor kind of supporting you through that, or was there a particular situation that happened and you were like, I'm done?
Yeah, great question. So it was a combinations of things. It
Hmm.
was, and they were both external and internal, right? So it was my mentor sort of affirming me, saying, look,
Hmm.
you are valuable. If they
Right,
don't value you, don't waste your time. Like, right?
right.
Throwing your pearls before swines,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, I
So,
love it. You say that again.
yes.
Say that again, Dr. Hill.
Yes, so that's biblical. So you don't throw your pearls before swines, right?
Right.
And so, because they're not going to appreciate it, they're just going to eat it up, and
Right.
what good is that, right?
Right.
And so she was like, you could go somewhere else. You can do something else. And I knew that because it wasn't my
Mhm.
first job. I had a good career. And then
Mhm.
I had some other people in my ear, if you will, like, girl, that's crazy. Why are you doing that? But as you mentioned, as Black women, you know, professional women, we know that we have to do more, be
Yeah.
more, show up differently, and you just don't
Yeah.
want to like tap out, right? You sort
Right.
of feel like if I could just do one more thing, it'll be good enough. And
Right.
that's not true, right?
Right. Right. So
And
you
if you
talked,
have
Dr.
to
Hill,
work that
about
hard to prove yourself, then it's not worth it.
exactly. So you're trying to prove yourself in a system that will never see your worth. And so it's kind of like when we look outside of us for people to affirm our worth, then we're giving our power away. And so taking our power back and saying, no, I see my worth and I deserve better than that. Other people around you saw that, but I think you got caught up in the moment, right? And sometimes we get into this thing, and I know I do too. Sometimes we get caught in this thing like, I'm going to prove to you that I can do this. I'm going to prove to you that you're not going to run me out of here, right? So we get into that, but then again, it's causing us harm. It's not helping anything. And so it sounds like you had a circle of people around you who cared for you, and they helped you reality test. No, that was not you. That's them, right? You need to go somewhere else. And I think too, having that tunnel vision sometimes we have when we're in the fire, we're getting burnt, right? We're getting crispy, so when we're in the fire, we have a hard time thinking about other options and knowing that other options are available to us because we worked so hard to get our degrees and get all these things. Sure, there's other opportunities for us, but sometimes we get locked into that, right? So I'm wondering, Dr. Hill, if you can also share um, ways that you have been manifesting healing in relation to that situation. Let's think about the last situation, right? So once you left there, how did you start manifesting healing?
So I relied on my support group. By the time I did leave, I was so done and over it that I had started working on my internal process before my exit date. So I was
Hmm.
able to put together a strategy after being very prayerful and thoughtful of how to exit, right?
Hmm.
So I think that what could happen is, and what does happen is that you're so angry and you legitimately feel like, oh, they did me so wrong. I'm just gonna, if I burn bridges, if I throw gasoline on this, whatever, right?
Right.
And so I worked through that because I didn't want to throw
How
gasoline.
did you work through that, Dr. Hill? I think that would be helpful for people to hear.
Yeah. So what I did was I really was able to take in that I was valuable. Once I had that shift of I don't have to prove to them, I really don't. And there's
Hmm.
nothing I can do that will make them happy or like
Hmm.
me or value me or whatever, right?
Right.
So once I got that in my spirit, if you will, I started thinking about the options of, you're not happy here, so you're not doing your best here. So the people
Right.
that you were trying to help aren't getting everything that you would give if you were in your happy place. So where
Right.
can you do that, right? So I started brainstorming. What can I do? How can I take these skill sets and pivot or transition?
Hmm.
And fortunately, I did have a good support group. They were like team me, like you could do it, you could do it, yay, 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 right? And sometimes we don't have that. In my
Right.
previous position where I left, people were like, oh, just stay. Just, you've invested so much time in this. Just stay. You can write it out.
Oh,
So it was completely opposite. I had a very
yeah.
different experience in this last situation where I believe that that external support helped me to come to a place of reconciling and being able to move on very differently than how I, left the previous place.
Right, right, right. So let me ask you something, Dr. Hill, because you talked about your circle of support. You talked about this internal process in which you became more confident, right, in terms of your worth and looking at other options, brainstorming. Was there ever a point during that process when you were in the fire of the bullying that you started to question yourself or question your worth or other things in that regard in terms of that negativity was coming within and you started internalizing that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I felt like, what did I do wrong? Um, why is this happening to me? And then I was able to sort of do a bit of reality checking myself and
Hmm.
saying, oh, maybe this is happening to me because I'm the only woman in this room, not just a
Hmm.
woman of color. I'm the only woman in here.
Wow.
And, people, I would have an idea and bring it forward, nicely laid out and thought out because I knew that, nobody wants to waste any time in
Hmm.
meetings or otherwise. So I would have plans developed and it would just kind of fall on deaf ears, if you will, only for later somebody else to bring it up and
Right.
mansplain it and get credit for my idea. So
You
I was
said
like,
mansplain it. Is that
this
what
is
you
a
said, Dr.
gender
Hill? You said mansplain. I love it. Yes.
yeah,
Take ownership,
yeah,
steal your stuff.
yes, yes. So then I thought, I was like, well, then I just won't say anything because
Your sound is going down again.
let's see. All right, how about that? Is
That's
that
better.
better?
That's better.
Okay.
Yes. So
And
when that would happen,
so I started thinking like, why should I even contribute? If what I say doesn't matter or they're gonna steal my ideas all the time, I just won't say anything. So
hmm,
I then felt like, well, then what am I doing here?
hmm,
So it was like this vicious circle. So I would have these moments of awareness and insight, and then I would pivot and adjust. But then I just made myself smaller. I sort of
ooh,
became voiceless, right? I would be sitting in meetings and then I would try to say, well, forget it. I'm still getting this good salary, so I'll just come up with my laundry list. But that was
wow,
goofy because, again, it goes back to me not contributing in the way that I wanted to contribute. So
right.
I did feel undervalued. I felt, that there was some sexism going on there. And then there were
Mhm,
other times when I would be in one on one meetings where I felt like it was sexism and racism. And
mm,
so I would feel really, really like uncomfortable. And
right.
so then I thought, well, what is it? What's wrong with me? When you talk about the self-doubt, again, what could I do to make this situation better, to prove myself? And it is
Mm,
a vicious circle. And it's just,
yeah.
I feel like you can't win with bullies.
You can't win. Absolutely. And I think a lot of us get caught in like this death spiral, right? And then we end up really harming, right, ourselves, our spirits, our bodies. I've seen so many Black women, come with, develop terminal illnesses related to job stress. And we need to really recognize that it takes that serious, serious toll. So, Dr. Hill, in terms of, it was so profound when you said that you were making yourself smaller. So it was like you were dimming your light because number one, you felt like they'll never notice it. And then they'll just try to steal my light or whatever shine I have anyway, right? So that's always a sign too that it's time to leave a job when they're not affirming you or they're not encouraging you to shine your light and stand in that light. They were making you kind of dimmer, right? So in terms of what made you stay, because we always know that people can say, oh, it's not that big of a deal. to either stay in a job or to even leave a job. You'll hear people say, just
Right.
leave. But it's not that easy. It really is not, right? So in addition to feeling like you have to prove things, thinking about, the financial responsibilities that you have, what were some other things that kept you there as long as you were there?
So part of it is like the culture, right? You get a good job and you want to keep it, right?
Yeah.
And so we do know that there's plenty of jobs out there, right? I got that job, I could get another one. But once you're there, you're invested in it. And
Mm,
you're invested in it, but the company is invested in it as well, right? They hired you,
mhm,
they trained you, and
mhm,
and so to leave just like at a snap could feel like, well, why am I blowing off this investment?
mm,
And I don't want to disappoint the people who did sort of hold me up because there
right.
were people at that job that were Team Loren. Let me tell
Oh,
you,
wow.
they were like, well, what can we do for you? Can
Mhm.
okay, they invested in some coaching. They helped me with, what's called managing up. And so
What is that?
like rolling my eyes because
What is managing up? What is that?
so managing up, if you are working with someone who supervises you and you're having some challenges, you manage upward, right? So we think about if you're a director or you're a supervisor, you have subordinates. So you manage downward, right? Because you got
Okay.
to keep the people, based on the mission and all that work. But if you're
Hmm.
managing up, it's more about relationship. How do you hold this person in a way that is helpful to you? And that's a whole skill set that
Wow.
I didn't even know there was a term for until the person in HR was like, "We can help you with managing up," and I was like, "Really? How's that going to work?" So I
Hmm.
learned a lot about that. Didn't really work,
Okay,
but
I was
it
about to
was
say, like, what happens when you are trying to do that with someone with a manager or supervisor who's not self-aware, right, or has a bullying mentality? It seems like it puts the onus on you, right? Like,
it
oh, just
does.
manage up.
It does. It does. But the thing that there were some really tangible takeaways from that, right? So in managing up, it was part of me taking back control, right? So when
Hmm.
we would have our one-on-one meetings, I would try to drive the agenda, right? So I would come with certain things. If there were deficits in my performance that that person had pointed out, I would speak during our one-on-ones to how I was addressing those. So it helped me sort of regain part of my voice. So
Yes.
managing up does put some of the onus on you, but it's also empowering, right? Because I was able to write things, I was able to speak to certain things. And
Right.
then, when it came time for these subjective statements, I was
Hmm.
able to address them in a very like, no, here's what I did, here's how I
Right. So you
contributed,
had the data.
blah, blah, blah.
You had the data right there, right?
I have the data. But
Yes.
when you're dealing with a bully, all that does is make them more mad.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm wondering too, Dr. Hill, if you could just speak a little bit in terms of, toxic cultures in which the bullying behavior is condoned or supported. And what about the people who are witnessing the bullying, right? So what was your experience like with those people? Like they know what's happening, but they're just complicit. They're not saying anything about it.
Yeah, so that's an excellent point. So I found that there were a couple of camps, right? There were the condoners, which were the higher ups, right? They
Hmm.
sort of I call it condoning because they turn a blind eye to it.
Right.
Then there are the people who are bystanders, and they some of them are like, yeah, I know that's great, but some of them are scared, right? They're
Mhm.
like, it happened to me too, or I understand what's going on, but I don't want it to happen to me. So if the bully is on you, then that there won't be on me today, right?
Oh,
And so there was it was there was a
it's like a
lot,
survival mentality. You know what I
very
mean?
much
Like,
so.
I'm sorry that's happened to you, but rather it be you than me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Or everybody coming in wondering, well, who is it going to be today? Right? So everybody is hyper vigilant. People
Oh,
are, like, who's going to be the sacrificial lamb
oh
today?
my gosh.
Yeah, it was like, yeah, I mean, the place ended up having multiple lawsuits. Um, yeah, and so they were, some people were able to demonstrate like a pattern of
Oh my gosh.
this at the place. And so
Right.
I left before that happened, but that
Okay.
just goes to show that it continued and there was a
Yeah.
culture.
Yes. 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 And what's so disturbing is it was a mental health type of a culture, right? So you're in academia
Yeah.
and mental health, and then you're being harmed, and your mental health is being harmed by people, other people in the mental health field. So that's what
Right.
makes it just so like kind of mind blowing.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
you would think they would have a certain level of self awareness, but clearly no. Right? Okay, okay. So, Dr. Hill, I'm wondering if you could just share with the listeners as we're winding down a little bit about your business. How will people access your services? If you could just share that with the listeners.
Sure. So again, thank you so much for having me on today. And we support each other. I mean, I
Yeah.
totally love your business lifting as we climb. My business is titled Acclivity, and it is, if you look that up, it means ascending. So there's a slope that you're ascending, and what we do is we help people go up that slope so that they
I love
get
it.
to their higher self. And
I
it's
love it.
all about support, right? I think that one of the things that I love about what you do and, how you reach out to people is the mentoring, helping with those who are younger than us and peers. And you and I met in an academy, and we also live close together, and we found out we know a lot of the same people. So when you start traveling in sort of this rarefied air, it's not difficult to bump into good people who are doing great things, right? And the
Yes.
more we can get the message out about it's okay to seek help,
Yes.
whether that is mental health, which we have an affinity for because we're both psychologists, but
Hmm.
also career coaching, right?
Hmm.
So the reason that I started my academic career coaching was because of, some of the awful stuff that I experienced when I was in
Hmm.
higher ed. But hey, it wasn't all bad, right? I was able to promote to from assistant to associate. Prior to that, I was adjunct faculty for a number of years. I ended up being department chair at one university and went on to become a program chair at another university. So with women in higher ed in the academy,
Hmm.
and then racial and ethnic minorities, sometimes it can be difficult navigating that maze, right? And
Yes.
so I am here to help people who are interested in either transitioning into higher ed, or if you are in higher ed and you need some advice about, what's my next promotion, or do I want to go into administration, or do I want to
Hmm.
transition out? Hey, I'm here to help. So
Yeah.
please, you can find me on LinkedIn, you can find me on Twitter, you can go to my website, which is theacclivity.com. I also have a podcast. And so I am readily available.
Yes, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I was thinking as you were talking in terms of, you know, again, there's different professions that we go in and we feel alone. And part of the career coaching, and I'm assuming, but I'm more than likely it does include like real talk about what it's like to be in academia. And, so there's not like, okay, this is the reality of what happens. And I always think that it would be so helpful for graduate students if there's that real talk conversation with them before they leave, right? To let them know how people might see them, how people might treat them, what are the different resources available. And actually, I saw one of the comments in the chat, and it was talking about a graduate student, right, experiencing bullying as a graduate student. And I know that I encountered that as well, and how isolating that is, particularly when you're going into something that you've really worked hard to be there. And so, what are some different resources maybe for graduate students if they're experiencing workplace bullying? I mean, well, bullying in the graduate school.
Yes, yes. So I'm so glad you brought that up because I actually work with grad students. In fact, just last week I was at Pepperdine speaking to some graduate students who were in the final phases of their program. And I say to them, try to find a mentor
Hmm.
before you exit the program so
Yeah,
that you have an idea of how to bridge from being a graduate student into the profession, whichever discipline you go into.
yeah.
It's important to talk to somebody who's already there so that you
Hmm.
also know that this is just a short time, right? And I say
Yeah,
a short time, whether you're getting a master's or a doctorate, you're going to spend far more time in your career than you're going to spend in your graduate program.
right.
So you can get through it. You can seek help. You might need to go to therapy because, hey, bullying is no joke, right? So there's totally nothing wrong with going to see a therapist to talk about what's going on. Like I
Hmm.
said, we were hyper vigilant, we were stressed out, and you might need someone to kind of walk you back from that. Even if you are in the health profession
Right,
discipline, you should get some support from someone else.
right. So thinking about not only mentorship, but as you said, if you might need additional support in the form of mental health. And we talked about, the stigma we have of mental health, particularly in our communities and mental health treatment. But I think another challenge for us, particularly as Black women, sometimes it's hard for us to admit that we're hurting, right? And so being able to say, I'm hurting and I need some help. Now, we don't want to say that to everybody, but being honest with ourselves and taking that time to take care of ourselves is so important. And Dr. Hill, you spoke so beautifully about how you were able to transform that experience. So you manifested healing, and then you're trying to help support other people. So that post-traumatic growth in terms of how you can support other people. And it's so important for us to think about how do we rechannel that energy away from fighting and proving a point and making ourselves smaller like that's wasted energy. How do we direct that into taking care of ourselves, getting therapy or support if we need it, and how do we help support other people as we lift, as we climb, right? So as we're moving forward, how do we help support other people in the process? So I want to thank you so much, Dr. Hill, for joining us. And I just want to tell the listeners that next week we're going to have a double dose. So we're going to have a morning IG Live and an evening IG Live. As we're winding down towards the end of the month, we're going to have a psychologist from England and we're going to have a school psychologist from New York. So we're going to come together and talk, and want to let you know also that you're able to access all of the videos on my YouTube channel, Lifting as We Climb Consulting Wellness Services. So please feel free to access those videos, share those videos, subscribe, like, all that stuff, right? So I look forward to seeing all the viewers or seeing comments from you next Monday. And again, keep an eye out because it's going to be two different IG Lives on that day. And on November 29th will be our last, I think, Manifesting Healing, talking about Black women in the workplace. And it's going to be a celebration in which we talk about ways that we have manifested healing. And I'm going to get responses, or different audience members are going to be joining in and talking about that. And then I'm also going to be talking about a coaching program that I'm going to be launching to support Black women dealing with workplace bullying and trying to transition out, right? So again, thank you everyone for joining, and have a good evening. And again, Dr. Hill, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.